Grace Novak had never expected her assignment in Mumbai to change everything, but standing in the marble lobby of the Meridian Hotel at 2 in the morning, watching a stranger argue passionately with the night manager about displaced flood victims needing shelter, she felt something shift inside her chest. The man wore an expensive suit despite the late hour, his dark hair slightly disheveled, and his voice carried the kind of authority that made people listen. He was insisting the hotel open its ballroom to families who had been evacuated from the flooded neighborhoods nearby, and he was offering to pay for everything himself. Grace had been sent to Mumbai by her nonprofit organization to document water infrastructure projects, but the monsoon had arrived early and with unusual force. She had been trying to get information about safe routes back to her accommodation when this scene unfolded before her. "Sir, I understand your concern, but we have protocols," the night manager said, wringing his hands. "Then break them," the man said firmly. "There are children sleeping on wet streets 3 blocks from here. Your ballroom is empty. Make it work." Grace found herself stepping forward. "Excuse me, I work with Clean Water Alliance. We have emergency supplies in our warehouse. If you are serious about helping those families, I can arrange for bedding, clean water, and medical kits to be delivered here within the hour." The man turned to look at her, and Grace felt the full force of his attention. His eyes were dark brown, intelligent, and currently filled with determined compassion. He was handsome in a way that seemed almost unfair, with strong features and the kind of presence that filled a room. "You can do that?" he asked. "I can make some calls," Grace said, "but only if the hotel agrees to open the space." The night manager looked between them, clearly overwhelmed. The man pulled out his phone and made a quick call. He spoke rapidly in Hindi, then switched back to English. "The owner of this hotel is a friend. He is sending authorization now. Please make your calls." Grace did not hesitate. She contacted her colleagues, woke up her supervisor in New York who approved the emergency supply release, and within minutes had set a plan in motion. The man worked alongside her, coordinating with local emergency services and arranging for buses to safely transport the displaced families. By 4 in the morning, the hotel ballroom had been transformed into a temporary shelter. 50 people, including 15 children, were settling into clean, dry space with food, water, and medical attention. Grace helped a young mother get her baby settled, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "You did a good thing tonight," the man said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of chai. "We both did," Grace said, accepting the tea gratefully. "I did not catch your name." "Pierce Thorne," he said, extending his hand. "And you are Grace Novak," she confirmed, shaking his hand. His grip was warm and firm. "What brings you to a hotel lobby at 2 in the morning arguing about flood victims?" "I was flying back from Singapore and saw the flooding from the air. I could not sleep knowing people were suffering when I had resources to help," Pierce said simply. "What brings an American nonprofit worker to Mumbai? Clean water infrastructure assessment," Grace explained. "Though this monsoon is making everything more complicated, half the areas I was supposed to visit are underwater." Pierce's expression grew thoughtful. "Clean water infrastructure. That is important work. How long are you in India?" "Another 3 weeks, assuming the weather cooperates," Grace said. They talked for another hour, sitting on folding chairs in the hotel corridor while the families slept inside. Grace learned that Pierce was in international manufacturing, though he did not specify exactly what kind. He seemed genuinely interested in her work, asking intelligent questions about water purification systems and sustainable infrastructure. As dawn broke, Grace reluctantly said she needed to get back to her hotel to change and prepare for the day. Pierce insisted on having his driver take her, and Grace was too tired to argue. "Can I see you again?" Pierce asked as they stood beside the car. "Maybe for dinner." "I would like to hear more about your work." Grace hesitated. She had rules about getting involved with people while on assignment, but there was something about Pierce that made her want to break those rules. "Dinner sounds nice." They exchanged numbers, and Grace spent the car ride back to her hotel trying not to smile like an idiot. She failed completely. 3 days later, Pierce took her to a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. He arrived in casual clothes, dark jeans, and a fitted shirt that showed off his athletic build, and Grace felt her heart skip when he smiled at her. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Grace replied, gesturing to her simple blue dress. "Though I have to admit I am more comfortable in field clothes." Dinner was incredible, not just the food but the conversation. They talked about everything from global development challenges to their favorite books to childhood memories. Pierce grew up in California, the son of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to give him opportunities. Grace grew up in Chicago, the youngest of 4 children in a deeply Catholic family. "My mother wanted me to be a nun," Grace said with a laugh. "She was not thrilled when I chose international development instead. But you are still helping people," Pierce pointed out, "just in a different way." "That is what I told her," Grace said. "Faith without works is dead, right?" "I take that seriously. My faith calls me to serve, and this is how I do it." Pierce was quiet for a moment. "I admire that, your commitment to living your values." "What about you?" Grace asked. "Do you have a faith tradition?" "I was raised Hindu," Pierce said. "Though I will admit I am not the most observant. My mother was very devout. She passed away 5 years ago, but I still carry her teachings with me." They talked more about their different religious backgrounds, finding common ground in shared values of compassion and service. Grace felt herself falling for this man, which was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Over the next 2 weeks, Pierce and Grace saw each other almost every day. He took her to temples and markets, introduced her to his business associates, and listened with genuine interest as she explained the complexities of water system engineering. She learned that he was passionate about sustainable manufacturing and had built his business on environmental principles. One evening, as they walked along Marine Drive watching the sunset, Pierce took her hand. "I need to tell you something, Grace." Her heart jumped. "Okay." "I am not just in manufacturing," Pierce said slowly. "I own a global manufacturing company, multiple companies actually. I am what people would call a billionaire." Grace stopped walking and looked at him. "A billionaire?" "Yes," Pierce said, watching her face carefully. "I did not tell you at first because people treat me differently when they know, but you should know the truth. My company is worth about $3 billion. I have homes in 4 countries. I employ thousands of people. And none of that matters as much to me as being honest with you." Grace processed this information. She had suspected Pierce was wealthy, but this was on another level entirely. "Why are you telling me now?" "Because I am falling in love with you," Pierce said quietly. "And I cannot fall in love with someone while keeping secrets." Grace felt tears prick her eyes. "I am falling in love with you too, and honestly, the money part does not change that. I fell for the man who argued with a hotel manager about helping flood victims. That is who you are to me." Pierce pulled her close and kissed her, and Grace felt like everything in the world was exactly right. But reality intruded 2 days later when Grace had a video call with her family. Her mother, Maria, her father, Thomas, and 2 of her siblings all crowded around the camera to talk to her. Grace made the mistake of mentioning she had met someone. "What is his name?" her mother asked immediately. "Pierce Thorne," Grace said. "Is he Catholic?" her mother asked. "No, Mom. He is Hindu." The silence on the other end was deafening. Her father finally spoke. "Grace, you know how we feel about interfaith relationships. The challenges, the complications." "Dad, we are just dating," Grace protested, though her heart sank. "These things lead to marriage," her mother said firmly. "And marriage is a sacrament. How will you raise children? What about your faith community? Grace, we love you, but we cannot support this relationship." The call ended badly, with Grace in tears and her family disappointed. She knew their faith was important to them, but she had not expected such immediate rejection. Pierce found her sitting in her hotel room that evening, eyes red from crying. She had texted him that she needed to talk and he had come immediately. "My family does not approve," Grace said simply. "Because you are not Catholic, because we are from different faiths." Pierce sat beside her on the bed, his expression serious. "What do you want, Grace? Not your family, not me, you." "I want you," Grace whispered, "but I also want my faith, I want my family, I do not know how to have all of it." "Then we figure it out," Pierce said firmly. "Together. If this is real between us, and I believe it is, then we face the challenges head-on. We do not run from them." Over the following weeks, as Grace's assignment in Mumbai came to an end, they had many difficult conversations. They talked about what their different faiths meant to them, how they could respect each other's beliefs while maintaining their own. Pierce surprised her by suggesting they meet with religious leaders from both traditions. "I want to understand your faith better," he said. "And I want you to understand mine. Not to convert each other, but to truly know what matters to each of us." Grace agreed, touched by his willingness to engage so deeply. They met with a Catholic priest who worked in interfaith dialogue, a thoughtful man named Father Michael who listened to their concerns without judgment. "Faith is not meant to divide," Father Michael said. "It is meant to connect us to the divine and to each other. If you both take your beliefs seriously, if you respect each other and are committed to raising any future children with exposure to both traditions, I see no reason why your love cannot flourish." They also met with a Hindu teacher, an older woman named Priya who ran a small temple near Pierce's Mumbai office. She was even more direct. "Love is the highest expression of faith," Priya said. "All our traditions teach this. If your love makes you both better people, more compassionate, more devoted to service, then it is blessed by the divine, whatever name you give to God." These conversations helped, but Grace's family remained resistant. Her mother sent long emails about the importance of marrying within the faith. Her father called to express concerns about cultural differences. Only her youngest brother, Marcus, was supportive. "Grace, you have spent your whole life serving others," Marcus said during one call. "Maybe it is time to let yourself be happy. If Pierce is a good man who loves you and respects your faith, that is what matters." Grace had to return to New York for work, and the separation from Pierce was physically painful. They video chatted every day, usually twice a day, but it was not the same as being together. Pierce flew to New York 3 weeks later, and Grace met him at his hotel. The moment she saw him, she ran into his arms, not caring who was watching. "I missed you," Pierce said, holding her tight. "I missed you more," Grace replied. Pierce had arranged to stay in New York for 2 weeks. He wanted to meet Grace's family, despite her warnings that they might not be welcoming. Grace was terrified, but she also knew it was necessary. The dinner at her parents' house in Chicago was tense at first. Her mother was polite but cold, her father distant. Pierce handled it with grace, answering questions about his work, his family, his intentions with grace. He did not hide his faith, but he also made it clear he respected theirs. "I love your daughter," Pierce said directly to Grace's parents. "I know we come from different traditions, but I believe those differences can strengthen us rather than divide us. I am committed to supporting Grace in her faith, and I hope you can see that my love for her is genuine." Her mother softened slightly. "How would you raise children?" "With exposure to both traditions," Pierce said. "I would want my children to know the beauty of both Hindu and Catholic teachings, to understand that faith can take many forms and that respect and love are universal." "That is not how it works in our faith," her father said quietly. "We believe in one path to God." "With respect, sir, I believe there are many paths up the same mountain," Pierce replied. "And I think Grace believes that too, even if she has not said it aloud." Grace felt her heart pound. Pierce was right. Her time working in different countries, seeing how faith manifested in countless beautiful ways, had changed her understanding of religion. She still considered herself Catholic, still attended Mass when she could, still prayed the rosary her grandmother had given her. But she also believed God was bigger than any one tradition. "Dad, Mom, I love you both," Grace said. And I love my faith, it is part of who I am, but Pierce is part of who I am becoming. He challenges me, supports me, and makes me want to be a better person. Is that not what a good partner should do? The dinner did not end with her parents' blessing, but it ended with understanding. Her mother hugged her at the door and whispered, "If you are sure about him, then I will try to accept it." It was a start. 6 months later, Grace was working on a project in Kenya when Pierce showed up unannounced at her field site. She was filthy, covered in mud from inspecting a well installation, when she saw him standing beside a Land Rover looking completely out of place in his expensive clothes. "What are you doing here?" Grace asked, shocked. "I came to ask you something important," Pierce said. "But first, can I help? I have no idea what you are doing, but I can follow instructions." Grace laughed and put him to work. For the next 3 hours, Pierce assisted her team with the well installation, getting thoroughly dirty and not complaining once. Her colleagues were impressed, and Grace fell even more in love with this billionaire who was not afraid to work with his hands. That evening, after they had both showered and changed, Pierce took her to a spot overlooking the Masai Mara at sunset. The sky was painted in brilliant oranges and pinks, and Grace felt overwhelmed by the beauty of it all. "Grace Novak, I have spent the last 6 months falling more in love with you every single day," Pierce said, taking her hands. "I have learned so much from you about faith, about service, about what it means to live with integrity. You have made me a better man." He dropped to one knee and Grace gasped. "I know our path is not traditional," Pierce continued. "I know we will face challenges because of our different backgrounds, but I also know that I want to spend my life with you, figuring it all out together. Will you marry me?" The ring was beautiful, a simple diamond set in platinum, but Grace barely looked at it. She was focused on Pierce's face, on the love and hope she saw there. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes." They married 8 months later in a ceremony that honored both traditions. Father Michael worked with Priya to create a service that incorporated Catholic and Hindu elements. Grace wore a white wedding dress for the church ceremony and changed into a red and gold sari for the Hindu rituals. Pierce wore a traditional sherwani, looking so handsome that Grace could barely breathe when she saw him. Her family attended, and while her mother still had reservations, Grace could see her trying. Pierce's extended family flew in from India, and the mixing of cultures and traditions was beautiful. They exchanged vows in both English and Sanskrit, promising to honor each other's faith and to build a life based on love and mutual respect. The reception was a joyous celebration with food from both cultures, music that ranged from traditional Indian classical to contemporary American pop, and dancing that lasted until 3 in the morning. Grace's brother Marcus gave a toast about love transcending all boundaries, and Pierce's business partner Rajesh spoke about how Grace had changed Pierce for the better. But the moment Grace remembered most clearly was late in the night when she and Pierce snuck away to a quiet balcony overlooking the venue. They stood together, his arms around her waist, her head on his shoulder. "We did it," Grace said softly. "We did," Pierce agreed, "and it was perfect." "I love that our wedding honored both of our faiths," Grace said. "I feel like we are building something new, something that respects where we each come from while creating our own path forward." "That is exactly what we are doing," Pierce said. He turned her to face him. "Grace, I want you to know something. Loving you has deepened my faith, not diminished it. Learning about your beliefs, seeing how seriously you take your commitment to God and to service, it has made me think more deeply about my own spirituality. You have given me a gift." "You have given me the same gift," Grace said, her eyes filling with tears. "I thought loving someone from a different faith would create conflict, but instead it has opened my heart wider. I see God in more places now. I understand that faith is not about rigid boundaries, but about love and service and compassion." They kissed, and Grace felt the truth of their bond settle into her bones. This was not just a marriage, it was a partnership that would make them both better people. The first year of marriage was an adventure. They split their time between Pierce's home in San Francisco and apartments in New York and Mumbai. Grace continued her work with Clean Water Alliance, and Pierce made sure his business interests supported her mission. He invested heavily in water infrastructure projects, using his wealth to amplify the impact of her work. They created a daily practice of sharing their faith traditions. Grace attended Mass on Sundays when possible, and Pierce came with her sometimes, sitting quietly and respectfully. Pierce maintained a small shrine in their home where he performed daily pujas, and Grace often joined him, learning the rituals and prayers. They found that their different practices enriched each other rather than creating division. Grace's relationship with her family continued to improve. Her mother visited them in San Francisco and was surprised to see how naturally they blended their traditions. She saw Grace pray her rosary every morning, saw Pierce's respect for her faith, and slowly began to accept that this was a real, strong marriage. 2 years into their marriage, Grace discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified to tell Pierce, not because she thought he would be unhappy, but because they had not fully discussed how to raise children in an interfaith household. Pierce's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, then immediately set her down gently, concerned he had been too rough. "We are having a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "We need to talk about how we are going to raise this child," Grace said seriously. "We have practiced both faiths ourselves, but a child needs clarity." They spent weeks in deep discussion, sometimes with Father Michael and Priya's guidance. They decided their children would be raised with exposure to both Hindu and Catholic traditions, with the understanding that when they were old enough, they could choose their own path. They would celebrate holidays from both religions, teach prayers from both traditions, and emphasize the common values of compassion, service, and love. "I want our children to see that faith is about how you live, not just what you believe," Pierce said. "If we model respect and love, they will grow up knowing that religion can unite rather than divide." Grace agreed completely. Their daughter, Maya Catherine, was born on a sunny morning in April. She had Pierce's dark eyes and Grace's smile, and both sets of grandparents fell instantly in love with her. Grace's mother held Maya and cried, all her reservations melting away in the face of her granddaughter's perfect little face. They held both a baptism and a Hindu naming ceremony for Maya. Some family members were confused, but most were moved by the beauty of honoring both traditions. Maya wore a white baptismal gown for her christening at Grace's childhood church, and a few weeks later, she was blessed in a traditional Hindu ceremony surrounded by Pierce's family. Grace watched these ceremonies with a full heart, understanding that their decision to embrace both faiths was not just working for them as a couple, but was creating something beautiful for their daughter. When Maya was 6 months old, Grace and Pierce started a foundation together. The Thorne Novak Foundation focused on water infrastructure and interfaith understanding, funding projects that brought together people from different religious backgrounds to work on practical solutions to community problems. "I want to take what we have learned and share it with the world," Grace explained to a reporter interviewing them about the foundation. "Pierce and I come from different faiths, but our love and our shared commitment to service have only been strengthened by those differences. If we can model that, maybe we can help others see that interfaith relationships do not have to be sources of conflict." The foundation flourished. They funded water projects in India, Kenya, Bolivia, and Indonesia, always partnering with local faith communities and encouraging interfaith cooperation. They sponsored dialogues between religious leaders, created resources for interfaith couples, and supported organizations working to break down religious barriers. 3 years after Maya's birth, their son Thomas Ravi was born. Named after Grace's father and Pierce's grandfather, he was a bridge between families and traditions just like his sister. The family of 4 created rich traditions of their own, celebrating Diwali with as much excitement as Christmas, observing Lent, while also participating in Hindu festivals. Grace often thought about how far they had come from that night in Mumbai when Pierce had insisted on helping flood victims. Their love story had not been simple or easy. They had faced opposition from family, navigated complex conversations about faith and tradition, and worked hard to create a life that honored both of their backgrounds. But those challenges had made their love stronger, not weaker. Every difficult conversation had deepened their understanding. Every moment of doubt had been overcome with commitment and communication. Every instance of judgment from others had only reinforced their determination to build a life based on love and mutual respect. On their 5th anniversary, Grace and Pierce returned to Mumbai, to the Meridian Hotel where they had first met. The hotel had permanently converted part of the ballroom into a community center, partnering with local organizations to provide ongoing services to vulnerable populations. A plaque on the wall credited Pierce and Grace with inspiring the project. They stood in the space where they had first worked together, now transformed into a thriving hub of community support. "You remember what I told you that first night?" Pierce asked, pulling Grace close. "You said I did a good thing," Grace replied. "I also thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen," Pierce admitted. "And I was terrified you would turn me down when I asked you to dinner," Grace laughed. "I almost did. I had rules about getting involved while on assignment." "I am very glad you broke your rules," Pierce said, kissing her forehead. "Me too," Grace said. "Pierce, I need you to know something. When we first met, I never imagined our different faiths would become such a central part of our story. I worried it would divide us. But instead, it has been one of our greatest strengths. You have taught me so much about your traditions, and in learning about Hinduism, I have understood my own Catholicism more deeply. Our love has expanded my understanding of God. You have done the same for me," Pierce said seriously. "Grace, you live your faith in a way that inspires me every day. Watching you serve others, seeing how your commitment to God translates into action, it has made me a more devout Hindu. You have shown me that faith is not just ritual but a way of being in the world." They held each other as the sun set over Mumbai, two people from different worlds who had built something beautiful together. Years later, when Maya was 10 and Thomas was 7, the children asked their parents about religion. They were old enough to notice that their family was different from their friends' families. "Why do we celebrate both Hindu and Catholic holidays?" Maya asked at dinner one night. Grace and Pierce exchanged a glance, then Pierce answered. "Because your mother and I come from different faith traditions, and we believe both are beautiful and valuable." "But which one is right?" Thomas asked. "They are both right," Grace said gently. "Different religions are different ways of understanding God and how to live a good life. The important thing is not which specific tradition you follow, but whether you live with love, compassion, and integrity." "What if we want to choose?" Maya asked. "Like, what if I only want to be Catholic or only want to be Hindu? Then we will support you completely," Pierce said. "We have raised you with both traditions so you can make an informed choice when you are ready. There is no pressure to pick one or the other, or to embrace both. Your spiritual path is your own." The children seemed satisfied with this answer, and Grace felt grateful they had built a home where such questions could be asked openly. The Thorne Novak Foundation continued to grow, becoming a major force in both water infrastructure development and interfaith dialogue. Grace and Pierce traveled the world together, bringing their children along when possible, showing them how different cultures expressed faith and how service could take many forms. On their 10th anniversary, surrounded by family and friends from multiple continents and countless faith traditions, Grace stood to give a toast. 10 years ago, I married a man from a different religion," she said. "My family was worried. Some of our friends were skeptical. We knew we would face challenges, and we did. But what we discovered is that love grounded in respect, communication, and shared values can overcome any obstacle. Pierce and I do not share the same religious tradition, but we share the same faith in love, in service, in building a better world. That shared faith has made us stronger than we ever could have been alone. Pierce added his own words. Grace taught me that interfaith marriage is not about compromise or sacrifice, it is about expansion. My heart is bigger because I love her. My understanding of God is deeper because I have learned from her tradition while maintaining my own. Our children are growing up knowing that faith can unite rather than divide, that respect and love are possible even across differences. That is the greatest gift we could give them. As Grace looked around the room at the people who had become part of their extended family, people from different countries, religions, and backgrounds who had been brought together by love and shared purpose, she felt overwhelming gratitude. She thought about that young woman in the Mumbai hotel lobby, afraid to get involved because it might complicate her assignment. She had no idea then that the man arguing about flood victims would become her husband, her partner, the father of her children. She had no idea their different faiths would become a source of strength rather than division, but life had unfolded in ways more beautiful than she could have imagined. Their love story was not simple, but it was real and deep and powerful. They had built a marriage on the foundation of mutual respect, a family that honored multiple traditions, and a life dedicated to service. Grace took Pierce's hand and squeezed it, a silent communication of love and gratitude. He squeezed back, and in that simple gesture was everything they had built together. Their journey had taught them that faith was not about walls and boundaries, but about bridges and connections. It had shown them that love could transcend any difference when both people were committed to understanding and growth. It had proven that two people from different worlds could create something new and beautiful without sacrificing who they were. As the party continued around them, Grace leaned her head on Pierce's shoulder and thought about the future. Maya was already talking about studying international relations, inspired by her parents' work. Thomas wanted to be an engineer who built water systems. Their children were growing up with open hearts and minds, ready to engage with a diverse world. Grace and Pierce had built more than a marriage. They had built a legacy of love that transcended boundaries, a model of how faith could strengthen rather than divide, and a family that proved different traditions could not only coexist, but enrich each other. It had started with a billionaire from a different religion, a chance meeting in Mumbai, and a shared commitment to helping others. It had grown into a love story that proved faith in all its forms could bring people together rather than push them apart. And every single day, Grace thanked God, however she understood the divine, for bringing Pierce into her life, and for showing her that love knows no religious boundaries, only the limits we place on our own hearts. They had refused to limit their love, and in doing so, they had discovered that their different faiths were not obstacles to overcome, but gifts to cherish, sources of strength that made their bond unbreakable.